kindergartners, nice to see you. I have 2 books to read this week, and I think you've heard the first one, but you might not have heard the second one. The first one is The 5 Chinese Brothers. It's by Claire Hutchett Bishop. Once upon a time, there were 5 Chinese brothers, and they all looked exactly alike. They lived with their mother in a little house not far from the sea. The first Chinese brother could swallow the sea. The second Chinese brother had an iron neck. The third Chinese brother could stretch and stretch and stretch his legs. The fourth Chinese brother could not be burned, and the fifth Chinese brother could hold his breath indefinitely. That means forever. Every morning, the first Chinese brother would go fishing, and whatever the weather, he would come back to the village with beautiful and rare fish, which he had caught and could sell at the market for a very good price. One day, as he was leaving the marketplace, a little boy stopped him and asked him if he could go fishing with him. No, it could not be done, said the first Chinese brother. But the little boy begged, and finally the first brother consented. Under one condition, said he, and that is you shall obey me promptly. Yes, yes, the little boy promised. Early the next morning, the first Chinese brother and the little boy went down to the beach. Remember, said the first Chinese brother, you must obey me promptly. When I make a sign for you to come back, you must come back at once. Yes, yes, the little boy promised. Then the first Chinese brother swallowed the sea, and all the fish were left high and dry at the bottom of the sea, and all the treasures of the sea lay uncovered. The little boy was delighted. He ran here and there, stuffing his pockets with strange pebbles, extraordinary shells, and fantastic algae. Near the shore, the first Chinese brother gathered some fish while he kept holding the sea in his mouth. Presently he grew tired. It is very hard to hold the sea, so he made a sign with his hand for the little boy to come back. The little boy saw him, but paid no attention. The first Chinese brother made great movements with his arms that said, "Come back!" But did the little boy care? Not a bit, and he ran further away. Then the first Chinese brother felt the sea swelling inside him and made desperate gestures to call the little boy back, but the little boy made faces at him and fled as fast as he could. The first Chinese brother held the sea until he thought he was going to burst. Then all of a sudden the sea forced its way out of his mouth, went back to its bed, and the little boy disappeared. When the first Chinese brother came back to the village alone, he was arrested, put in prison, tried and condemned to have his head cut off. On the morning of the execution, he said to the judge, "Your Honor, will you allow me to go and bid my mother goodbye?" "It is only fair," said the judge. So the first Chinese brother went home, and the second Chinese brother came back in his place. All the people were assembled on the village square to witness the execution. The executioners took his sword and struck a mighty blow. But the second Chinese brother got up and smiled. He was the one with the iron neck, and he simply could not have his head cut off. Everybody was angry, and they decided that he should be drowned. On the morning of the execution, the second Chinese brother said to the judge, "Your Honor, will you go and allow me to go and bid my mother goodbye?" "It is only fair," said the judge. So the second Chinese brother went home, and the third Chinese brother came back in his place. He was pushed on a boat, which was made for this open sea. When they were far out in the ocean, the third Chinese brother was thrown overboard. But he began to stretch and stretch and stretch his legs all the way down to the bottom of the sea, and all the time his smiling face was bobbing up and down in the crest of the waves. He simply could not be drowned. Everybody was very angry, and they all decided that he should be burned. On the next morning of the execution, the third Chinese brother said to the judge, "Your Honor, will you allow me to go and bid my mother goodbye?" "It is only fair," said the judge. So the third Chinese brother went home, and the fourth Chinese brother came back in his place. He was tied up to a stake, fire was set to it, and all the people stood around watching it. In the midst of the flames, they heard him say, "This is quite pleasant." "Bring some more wood," the people cried. The fire roared higher. "Now it is quite comfortable," said the fourth Chinese brother, for he was the one who could not be burned. Everybody was getting more and more angry every minute, and they all decided to smother him. Smother means you can't breathe. On the morning of the execution, the fourth Chinese brother said to the judge, "Your Honor, will you allow me to go and bid my mother goodbye?" "It is only fair," said the judge. So the fourth Chinese brother went home, and the fifth Chinese brother came back into his place. A large brick oven had been built on the village square, and it had been stuffed with whipped cream. The fifth Chinese brother was shoveled into the oven right in the middle of the cream. The door was shut tight, and everybody sat around and waited. They were not going to be tricked again, so they stayed there all night and even a little after dawn, just to make sure. Then they opened the door and pulled him out, and he shook himself and said, "My, that was a good sleep." Everybody stared open-mouthed and round-eyed, but the judge stepped forward and said, "We have tried to get rid of you in every possible way, and somehow it cannot be done. It must be that you are innocent." "Yes, yes," shouted all the people. So they let him go, and he went home. And the 5 Chinese brothers and their mother all lived happily together for many years. All right, I have another book, and this is the same in some ways and different in some ways. This is called The 7 Chinese Sisters, written by Kathy Tucker. Once upon a time, there were 7 Chinese sisters who lived together and took care of each other. Each sister had shining black hair and sparkling eyes. Each stood straight and tall, except for 7th sister, who was just a baby. But the sisters were very different. First sister could ride a scooter as fast as the wind. Second sister knew karate. Kick, chop, hi-ya! Third sister could count to 500 and beyond. Fourth sister could talk to dogs. Fifth sister could catch any ball, no matter how fast and how high it was thrown. Sixth sister could cook the most delicious noodle soup in the world. And 7th sister? No one was really sure yet what she could do, as she was so little she had never spoken even one word. Far away across the bridge through a forest and up a mountain lived a terrible dragon. One day he woke up very hungry. He took a big sniff, 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 and smelled something wonderful. It was 6 sisters' noodle soup. Down the mountain, over the forest, and across the bridge flew the dragon straight to the 7 sisters' house. The sisters were so busy that they didn't see him coming. First sister was polishing her scooter. Second sister was practicing for her black belt. Third sister was counting grains of rice. Fourth sister was talking to a stray beagle. Fifth sister was throwing a ball about a mile or so up in the air and catching it. Sixth sister had just stepped into the pantry to get some more noodles, and 7th sister was crawling around on the kitchen floor. When the dragon peeked in the kitchen door and saw plump little 7th sister, he forgot all about the soup, and instead he snatched up the baby. Then he flew back over the bridge and up the forest, up the mountain, and into his cave. But as soon as the dragon set 7th sister down, he was just going to get some salt. She said her first word ever, and it was an excellent word. It was, "Help!" The 6 sisters had just started to look for 7th sister when they heard her call. Right away they knew her voice. "7th sister's in trouble," cried first sister, leaping on her scooter. "We must save her." The other sisters hung on behind, pulled by first sister, who was strong as well as fast. The sisters sped across the bridge. Beyond was the deep forest filled with many trees, so many, third sister counted them by 2s. Now 7th sister's cries were louder. "Help! Help! Help!" The sisters headed up the mountain and soon reached the dragon's cave. They could smell smoke and hear the most awful roars. Fourth sister listened carefully. Dragons do not talk exactly like dogs, but she could understand a little. The dragon was roaring, "There's no use in calling for help. You're going to be my supper." And suddenly, seventh sister shouted her second word ever, which was no. "Bow wow ruff," said fourth sister, which meant, "If you don't bring her out, sir, you will regret it," in dog language. The dragon stopped roaring. What was that girl yelling? All he could understand was, "Bring her out, sir." But no one had ever tried to talk to him before, and he was so curious, he picked up seventh sister and rushed outside. Second sister stepped forward. Then, fast as lightning, she leaped into the air, slapped the dragon on the chin, and shouted, "Hi-ya!" The dragon was so surprised that, whoop, seventh sister flew out of his mouth. Back, back, back ran fifth sister, back, 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 and reaching up, 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 she caught seventh sister neatly, like a fly ball. When the dragon saw that his dinner was gone, he fell to the ground sobbing. "Hungry, hungry," he whimpered, and fourth sister understood him perfectly because the word hungry is exactly the same for dragons as it is for dogs. "He's starving," she explained, and now all the sisters could see that he was quite skinny and sort of sad. "Tomorrow sixth sister can bring him some soup," first sister said, "but we've got to get seventh sister home. She's all worn out, and she needs her diaper changed." "Sisters, go home," cried baby seventh sister, who was learning to talk very quickly now. First sister put seventh sister on her back and hopped on her scooter. The other sisters hung on behind, and they whizzed fast as the wind down the mountain. But when they reached the forest, first sister stopped. Now that they didn't have seventh sister's cries to guide them, how could they find their way through all these trees? "Don't worry," said third sister. "I counted the trees when we came. We must go past 500. And so when third sister had counted 500 trees by twos, the seven sisters came back to the bridge. They scooted across and back into their house, where they had a wonderful meal of six sisters' delicious noodle soup. And what did seventh sister do when she grew tall? She became the best storyteller in the world, and she always told this story first. Thank you for being such great listeners, and I hope you have a great week.